Hey everybody, it's the Ioniq guy. You join me today for my big 18-month, 20,000 mile review of my 2022 Hyundai Ioniq 5 SEL all-wheel drive. This color is called Digital Teal, and in my humble opinion is the best color that the Ioniq 5 is offered in, but I digress. So if you're in the market for an EV, specifically a Hyundai Ioniq 5, you're gonna wanna watch today's video because I'm gonna go over everything that's been great, everything that's been kinda what I'm gonna call meh, and then everything that I really do hate about this car, because no car is perfect and I want you guys to know everything that I find annoying about it. So if you want to know what it's been like owning an Ioniq 5 for the last 18 months, then stay tuned. So obviously looks are completely subjective, but for me, I absolutely love the way that this car looks. The second I saw it, I knew I wanted one, so I got a deposit in, and I just fell in love with this color, specifically Digital Teal. I think it looks amazing. It's kind of a chameleon in the sense that it can be green in some lighting, blue in some lighting, gray in some other lighting, but I just think it looks fantastic. I love the retro futuristic pixelated lights on the front and the back and in the side mirrors. I like the fact that it has a nice short front end. It makes parking this thing really easy. This car can be very deceptive. In photos, it looks a lot smaller than it actually is, but I'm 6'2", and standing next to it, you can see it's about 5 feet tall. So it's definitely a lot taller than a sedan, but it is a little bit shorter than most crossover SUVs that are internal combustion. For me, after the styling, the next thing I absolutely love is the charging speed. And that's the thing that everybody talks about with this car, is how fast it charges. Because it's an 800 volt based car versus a traditional 400 volt EV, this charges at pretty much twice the speed. In as little as 18 minutes, you can charge this car from 10 to 80% at a 350 kilowatt DC fast charger. And that is class leading by far, and at this price point, it's even more impressive. Now I have to stress, this is in ideal conditions. The battery has to be at the right temperature to do this. Now the car does have battery preconditioning, so it can warm or cool the battery as necessary to reach those impressive charge speeds. And the next thing I absolutely love about this car is the raw power. This thing has 320 horsepower, 446 pound-feet of torque, most powerful car I've ever owned, and it does 0 to 60 in about 4.5, 5 seconds depending on traction. One of my favorite things to do is to put people who've never been in an EV in here and just floor it and see their reaction. They're just like, whoa! It never gets old. I love driving this car just because of the power it has. Even the rear-wheel drive version of the Ioniq 5 has a good amount of power. It does 0 to 60 a little bit slower. With electric motors, you have all that torque from 0 RPM, so when you punch it, it just blasts off. Now another feature that I absolutely love is the vehicle to load function. It's an adapter that you plug into the J1772 charge port, and it just has a household outlet on it, and you can power pretty much anything up to 1800 watts. So for me, I actually use it as a backup generator for my home. I have a generator inlet on my electrical panel, and I just run an extension cord to that and I backfeed it just like you would backfeed a generator into your house. And I can power most of the 120 volt outlets in my house when the power does go out. So it's a really cool feature, but if my battery is at 100% state of charge, I can power my house for about 4 or 5 days, which is great. You also just have great visibility. I mean, the A-pillars are relatively narrow. Out the back, you have decent visibility, so I have no complaints about that whatsoever. I really find it easy to see everything outside of this car. So something else that I absolutely love about this car is the back seat space. You can see here, this is still set for me at 6'2". I've got maybe 1.5, 2 inches of knee room left. I've got plenty of room for my feet under the seat. I can also slide it forward and backward if I want to add more cargo capacity to the trunk area. So it's just a great place for even larger people like myself to spend some time. If I were on a road trip in this car, I'd be perfectly comfortable. Smaller people will find it even more comfortable. The seats also recline, which is nice. And because it's an EV, you have a completely flat floor. So even sitting in the center seat position, it's really not that bad. I could do a short drive in this car and be fairly comfortable. Another thing I love is the step-in height. You can see I can mostly just kind of slide right on in here. It's kind of between a sedan and between a small SUV. It is considered a crossover, so that makes sense, but it is just really comfortable to kind of get in and out of this car. You don't have to crouch down too much, or you don't have to climb up into it like with bigger cars. One of my absolute favorite features of the Ioniq 5 is the paddle shifters that allow you to dynamically change the amount of regeneration the car is providing. So if you're going down a hill, think of it as engine braking in any other gas-powered car. So if you do downshift in a gas car, you will feel a greater amount of braking being applied, and the same kind of applies here. So if you flip this pedal all the way to the left, it will go into what's called I-pedal, and that is single pedal driving. So if you finesse the accelerator just right, you can come to a complete stop without ever moving your foot from the accelerator pedal. And I really like driving that way. Now, if you pull the right paddle a few times, it will put you into coast mode. And you could just basically coast for a very long time before the car eventually does start slowing down. And then there's a few levels in between that vary it between those two extremes. But I'm all about I-pedal, so that's what I find myself in most of the time. Another thing that I really love about this car is actually the relatively small front trunk that it has. Now, a lot of people are going to poo-poo that, but I actually think it's a benefit. Because it is so small, it allows them to package the front end of this car very tightly, so you don't have a big, massive front trunk that you're probably rarely going to use, and then you actually benefit from having more interior space. So I can fit most critical things that I need for emergencies. I got a first aid kit, the tire inflation kit, my Tesla Tap Mini for charging using Tesla cables, and it all just lives up here in case of an emergency. So I don't have to go digging through the back trunk if I've got a bunch of stuff in there if there is an emergency situation. Now, in other markets around the world, the rear wheel drives do get a much deeper front trunk that you could fit a lot more stuff in, a couple grocery bags probably, or a small roller bag. But here, this is more than enough for me, and I find it to be just suitable for my needs. With this car, you also do have to open the front trunk using the latch next to the driver's knee, so you can't open it remotely from the key fob, so it kind of eliminates any use that you would get from, say, going grocery shopping and then quickly being able to pop this open and throw stuff in. You would have to go into the car, unlatch it, unhook the latch right here, and then you would be able to get in, and then you have to open this on top of that, so it isn't the most ideal thing if you did want to use it all the time. Something else I absolutely love about this car is how quiet it can be in the interior. So unlike gas cars, EVs are super quiet. Most of the noise is coming from the tires. And what's really nice about the Ioniq 5 is the front row and the back row both have double insulated glass. So they're double the thickness of a normal car. So they really block out a lot of the sound that would come in from the sides of the car. So it is tomb-like in here at times. And on long highway drives, it is so nice to not have to hear that tire noise too badly, and there's no engine noise, obviously, so that is another big plus. So being in an EV on a long drive is much more relaxing than any gas car I've ever owned, and I really enjoy it. Another one of my favorite things about this car is the air conditioning system. You have a resistance heater for the inside of the cabin to get it quickly up the temperature, but after the resistive heater has done the work of really rapidly heating the cabin, it switches over to the heat pump when it's not too cold outside, and it efficiently warms the inside of the car. So you get the best of both worlds with that system. It really warms up quick in here in the winter, cools down really quickly in the summertime, and with the Bluelink app, you can always remotely start the AC from any place on planet Earth. So that is really nice too. Typically when I'm about 10 minutes from leaving work, I will go ahead and start the car, get the cabin nice and conditioned for my drive home. And it does have 3 levels of auto, which is really nice. So if you don't want to be listening to the fan blasting at full speed, you can turn it down from level 3 auto to level 1 auto. That's usually what I leave it in. It also features a driver only setting. So if you don't have anybody else in the car and you want to save some energy, you can turn that mode on, and the air only comes out of these 2 vents closest to the driver, keeping you cool or warm. One of my other favorite things about this car has got to be Highway Drive Assist, which is Hyundai's level 2 driver assistance technology. So on the highway, when activated, it will keep you centered in your lane. It will also use adaptive cruise control to stay a certain distance from the car in front of you. And I just love this. It takes so much of the edge off on long drives. You can kind of just keep one hand on the wheel, sit back, and let the car handle most of the tediousness of keeping the car centered and a certain distance from the car in front of you. Now, I do have an issue with the way the brake lights actuate when in this mode, but I'll get to that later in this video. Now, this next really isn't specific to the Ioniq 5, but it is more specific to the EV lifestyle, and that is the fact that I can use my solar panels on my home to charge my car directly from the sun. And that is just such a cool thing to get to say. I generate my own fuel to get me from A to B. Not a lot of people can say that. I've had solar on my house for going on 2 years now, and I generate enough excess that I can also charge my car more or less from the sun. So I try to do that as much as possible. Obviously, there's times when I have to charge at night when the sun's not out, but I do have net metering here in Connecticut, so I don't pay for what I'm drawing from the grid at night. And here in Connecticut, about 30% of our base load of electricity generation is from nuclear. So even at nighttime, a good percentage of my car's charge is coming from clean energy. But nonetheless, it is still cool to say my car's powered by the sun. Now, I do also love the fact that this car does not require very much in terms of maintenance. So in the last 18 months, all I've really had to do, replace the cabin air filter, I've replaced the windshield wipers, the coolant lines haven't lost any fluid, the brakes haven't lost any fluid. One of the best things about an EV is that your brake pads are gonna last very long because you're very rarely using them. Most of the time you're using the motors for braking. You can see my front tires are still sitting at 6/32 of an inch. And my rear tires at about 5.5/32 of an inch, so they still have some life left as well. And this kind of brings me to another thing that I really like about the Hyundai Ioniq 5, and that is their warranty. This car has 10 years or 100,000 miles on the battery, as well as the drivetrain. And that just can't be beat in the industry. So you do have some peace of mind that if something were to happen with the battery, you would be covered. Another thing that I can say about my experience with the Ioniq 5 is that my service center, Key Hyundai of Manchester, Connecticut, has been great in terms of service. Bringing it there to get any of the technical service bulletins dealt with has been a non-issue. Everything has gone super smoothly. Shout out to their service techs there. They've done a great job. I know not every Ioniq 5 owner shares that sentiment, but for me, my service center has been fantastic. Now, last but certainly not least is the fact that this car can tow. And I have a 2-inch receiver on my car. I use this to tow my teardrop camper trailer that I've made some videos about in the past if you want to see. But if you've never towed with an electric car, it is just game changing. I used to tow with a Mazda CX-5 that only had a 2.5 liter inline 4-cylinder, and it struggled. This car has so much power, it doesn't even feel like you have a trailer on the back of it most of the time. Granted, my trailer only weighs 1,300 pounds, so the fact that this car is pretty heavy for its size, that also plays a role in having good towing characteristics. So the trailer doesn't really feel like it's pushing the car around like it did my Mazda CX-5. Here, it just feels really under control, and it's just generally a joy to tow my small trailer with the Ioniq 5. So one of the first things that's kind of meh with my car is the range and efficiency. So over 20,600 miles or so, I'm averaging 3.1 miles per kilowatt hour. It's not great. There's a lot more efficient EVs on the road. This is a small SUV, so you have to take that into account. The Ioniq 6 is much more efficient than this, and even the Ioniq 5 rear-wheel drive is a little bit more efficient than this car. So take that with a grain of salt. With my mostly highway commute, 3.1 miles per kilowatt hour, which when you multiply that by the size of the battery, which is 77.4 kilowatt hours, it's about an estimated 240 miles of range. Now that does sound about right over 18 months because I have experienced both summer and winter driving. So in the wintertime, I usually get about 190 to 200 miles of range on 100% state of charge. And during the summer, I get about 260, 270. So it is kind of splitting that difference. So it does sound right to me. But yeah, you're not going to get 300 miles with this car unless you have the rear-wheel drive, unless you're driving mostly in the city at highway speeds. 240, 250 is about what I would expect in good weather. And in colder temperatures, you're going to see more about 200 or less. Another thing that I'm not super crazy about with this car is the lack of a rear windshield wiper. Now, if you follow EV news and you recently saw the Hyundai Ioniq 5 high-performance version of this car announced, you know that it does now have a rear windshield wiper. But for 2024, the base Ioniq 5, not the high-performance model, does not get one. So we're kind of wondering if it's going to come in the future at all to the lower trims of the Hyundai Ioniq 5, or if it's just going to stay a feature of the Ioniq 5N. But I will say in the wintertime, if you drive somewhere with a lot of snow and rain, you do not have good visibility out the back of the car. Now, you learn to use your side view mirrors much more, but at the end of the day, this back windshield does not clear itself like Hyundai once advertised because of the aerodynamics that they say they designed with the air coming through this spoiler and then running down this. It just doesn't work like they claimed it once did. In the wintertime, I do find myself cleaning this back window manually almost every week. Another thing that I find kind of meh about this car is the headlights. Now, no Ioniq 5 comes with great headlights in my opinion, and for the 2023 model year, the SEL trim actually got a downgrade to the base trim's headlights, which was a big loss in my opinion. But even here, you have LED projection headlights, and they are okay. They don't turn, they don't swivel, they're not dynamic, they don't auto level. They don't do much of anything other than look really cool, but that's just not good enough in my opinion for a car that costs over $50,000. My $29,000 Mazda CX-5 had auto swivel headlights that turned with the steering wheel. It also had much better and easier to operate automatic high beams. The automatic high beams on this car, they're very finicky to operate. I don't really like them, so I don't really use them all that often. But yeah, not great headlights in my opinion. Obviously, they do the job, they illuminate the road, just not in the best way possible. Something else that's kind of meh is the suspension. Now, if you like a really comfortable ride, this is the car for you. It soaks up the bumps, but at the same time, that makes it really floaty. And sometimes when you're going over a lot of bumps on a bad stretch of highway, this thing just oscillates up and down. It's just a little too loose in my opinion. For 2023, other markets across the world did get an updated suspension for the Ioniq 5. We didn't receive it here in the United States. Maybe it'll come eventually. It's not coming for 2024, but 2025 is probably going to be a mid-cycle refresh, so maybe we'll see it then. And I haven't driven the car with an updated suspension, so I can't really comment on it. If you do have a newer Ioniq 5 from, say, a European country that does have it, leave a comment down below and let us know what you think of the suspension. Something else that's kind of meh is the fact that this car does not have wireless Android Auto or Apple CarPlay. And I know a lot of people say there's reliability issues with wireless Android Auto, Apple CarPlay. I would like to have wired and wireless as an option, considering you do have a wireless charging pad here in the center console, and unless your passenger is taking advantage of it, it basically never gets used, because if you're plugging your phone in for Android Auto or CarPlay, then it's plugged in and it's charging. You don't need a wireless charging pad. So I think that's a pretty big miss. We're all still really hoping that it'll eventually come as a software update or on a future model year. But until then, we don't have it. Now you can also buy adapters that plug into the USB port, but those have their own reliability issues. So I don't really use them anymore. I just simply plug in and it's been no issue for me. And on the topic of that USB port up front there, it is USB-A still. It is 2023 and we're still getting USB-A ports in our cars. Kia offers USB-A and USB-C, but here we only have USB-A ports throughout the car. Pretty much everything I own at this point that's electronic now uses USB-C, doesn't come with USB-A cables anymore. So you still have to use old cables with this car when most of the cables you're now getting are USB-C to Lightning or USB-C to USB-C on both ends. So you can't even use them in here without buying another adapter that's gonna cost you $5 to $10. So come on, Hyundai, please give us USB-C. It looks like most newly announced Hyundais are coming with USB-C, so I think it is just a matter of time before we see it here in the Ioniq 5. And the last meh thing that I have with this car is going to be the Bluelink app and connectivity. The app has gotten better over time, don't get me wrong. You can now see trip details and efficiency details in the app. You don't have to only look at it in the car, so that is nice. It's not super quick, so when you go to start your car remotely, it takes a minute, sometimes 2 minutes, and sometimes it fails and it just doesn't work. Now maybe that's just because you're in a dead zone, the car doesn't have the best signal, but I've had experiences where the car has just not started after trying multiple times, so I gotta knock it on that. But as with any app, they continue to improve it, and it can hopefully only get better from this point as more people get this car and ask for specific features and such. So now that we've talked about everything that I love and everything that's kind of meh with the car, let's talk about the things that I truly dislike with the Hyundai Ioniq 5. And the first thing is going to be the fact that this car is advertised as being able to charge at 48 amps or 11 kilowatts. And the sheer fact of the matter is it cannot. It overheats every single time. There's been a technical service bulletin released that keeps the car charging after it overheats, but just at a much lower charging speed. And if you don't have that technical service bulletin applied to your car, the car will just stop charging altogether. You'll wake up the next morning and your car won't have charged at all. So this is a big ongoing issue with this car. So until Hyundai releases a hardware fix for the car, I'm just gonna have to charge at 40 amps, which isn't a problem. I've always charged with 40 amps. I did make a video trying 48 amps, and that's when I discovered that my car also overheats, but 40 amps for me is plenty of charging power. But for some people, that is a deal breaker. If you need to add 200 miles overnight to your car, it's just not going to happen at a lower charge rate. And tying into that is the fact that this car cannot get powertrain software updates remotely like a Tesla can. So this car will get navigation system as well as map updates over the air wirelessly. You don't have to go into the dealership or use a thumb drive to install it. You can just wait, it'll eventually come to the car. Now, if you do want to have the most recent immediately, you do have to install it with a thumb drive. It's not super difficult. At any rate, this car cannot update its powertrain features remotely. So for anything related to that, you do have to bring it into a dealership. It's an added inconvenience. The Ioniq 6 supposedly can get powertrain updates. The new Kona electric will be able to get them. So it's just a problem that us early adopters are used to, and that's that it just wasn't ready for prime time when the car was launched. Hopefully 2025 Ioniq 5s will have it. We already know that 2024s coming out this fall will not have OTA updates, which is a bit of a disappointment. Another one of my big problems with this car is that even though as you approach and the door handles present themselves and you can get into the car, when you go ahead and get out of the car and walk away, the door handles do not shut and the car does not lock. Now, if this is a feature you're used to from your previous car, you're gonna have a lot of instances where you accidentally leave your car unlocked. And I hope you don't live in a crime-prone area because you will get stuff stolen out of your car. So you do have to be cognizant that the fact that this does not lock as you walk away. And it took me a long time to get used to that muscle memory of having to either push the button on the door handle or to utilize the key fob as I'm walking away. Another thing that drives me absolutely insane with this car has to do with towing. And that is the fact that when you are towing and you're reversing with a trailer or a bike rack, the rear parking sensors go ballistic, and there's no setting to disable that feature when you have a trailer connected to the car. Now, this sucks because the car knows when you have a trailer attached through the trailer light wiring harness, but even still, it doesn't deactivate them. So say you're doing a multi-point turn with a trailer, every time you switch from drive to reverse, you have to physically disable the rear parking sensors with that button on the dashboard, and it's just really tedious. It makes backing up a trailer really annoying. Another thing that I really hate about this car is the way the brake lights work. So there's been a lot of talk about this. Technology Connections did a big video that kind of brought this to the mainstream, and it is the fact that when you were in iPedal, single pedal driving, these will not come on at all unless your foot is completely lifted from the accelerator pedal. Now you can experience a serious amount of braking before these lights even come on. So somebody behind you could very easily not see you coming down to a slower speed and they could rear end you. Now I also have an issue with the way these perform when using highway drive assist. So you can be going down a very slight slope and these will turn on and just stay on the entire time you're going down that hill, even though you were not braking. You are not losing any speed. You're just maintaining speed so the car isn't decelerating. And this light will just come on and stay on. And I'm pretty sure it makes people driving behind you insane because I've had few instances where I've had people flashing their high beams at me on long stretches of highway, on slopes. So I really hope that with this upcoming brake light performance update that they're going to provide to Ioniq 5 owners, that it will eliminate some of these things that I'm talking about. They are saying that it is going to be based on G-force going forward with a deceleration of 0.13 Gs and above, it will trigger the brake lights on. But until that update comes on, I still have a big problem with the way the lights work. Another thing that I really hate is that in this car, there are no latches in the trunk area to fold down the back seats. To do that, you have to come around to each side of the car and pull the lever. Now, I have come to learn that the reason this is because you have these sliding seats that I do actually like. So they would have to figure out some sort of cable situation to go from a moving seat to the trunk area. And I guess they just couldn't figure that out and do it at a low cost. So it's just an omission that you have to deal with. I guess I'd rather have the ability to have more cargo space than to be able to fold the seats from the trunk. Okay, so something else that drives me absolutely bonkers with this car is the rear seat belts. So when you drop off a passenger, they're gonna get out of your car and they're just gonna let it go like that. Now, the issue here is that you can see right now, it's completely twisted, and the second you drive away, this thing's gonna rattle and rattle and rattle on this C-pillar here. It drives me absolutely bonkers. So I've tried to train my passengers to be cognizant of this, the people who ride in my car very frequently, but other people, I tend to forget to let them know, and I'll get 100 feet away from their drop-off, and then I'll start hearing that. I gotta pull over, reach in the back if I can on the driver's side, but I can't reach back and get this one, so then I gotta get out of the car, go around to the other side, and then twist this so that this little piece of fabric here on the back is actually resting on the C-pillar. So it drives me insane. If it is twisted, it's so irritating, I have to stop. Some people put a piece of felt right here on the C-pillar, and that kind of helps with the rattling sound. I haven't done that yet, but it might be something I explore in the future. Now, the last thing that I truly hate about this car doesn't really apply only to Hyundai Ioniq 5, but any EV right now, is the fact that Tesla's price cuts have made the value of my car absolutely plummet. I've gotten a couple quotes lately, and they're offering me $25,000 to $27,000 for this car that I paid about $44,000 for after the federal tax credit. So this car's value is dropped like a rock, but that's every EV thanks to Tesla starting this price war and lowering the price of the Model 3 and Model Y drastically. So I'm currently upside down on my loan with this car. If I were to sell it today, I'd be taking probably a $6,000 loss. And you might be saying, oh, that's because you have a high interest rate or a long-term loan. That's not the case. I got this car on a 60-month loan at 1% interest rate. So some of the people that bought limited trims and were paying $8,000, $10,000 over MSRP and were getting super high interest rate loans for 72, 84 months, they are seriously screwed with the value of their car. And I hope they plan on keeping them for 10, 12 years because they're gonna take a huge loss if they try to get rid of it anytime soon. So with 2024 Ioniq 5s hitting showrooms in the next few months, will I be upgrading to a 2024? And the simple answer is no. They have not made enough significant changes from my 2022 to the 2024 model year for me to warrant trading this in for the new version. Obviously, I would like the new version, but at this point, I'm very happy with my 2022. Now, if we see some more significant changes for 2025, that'll be a whole different story. 2025 should be more of a mid-cycle refresh year, so we should see some more significant changes coming to the Ioniq 5 then, but right now, just doesn't make sense, especially since I'm upside down on my loan. So the good news is you can expect more long-term updates on this car. I will definitely be doing a 2-year review and most likely a 2.5-year review. So we will get to see how this car actually ages over time. So in previous reviews of the car, I've gone into a lot deeper detail. I wanted to keep this video a little more concise, so I'll leave links in the description to all my other reviews of this car, as well as some other interesting videos about the Ioniq 5 if you are looking to buy one. As consumers, I want you all to be as well versed in this car as you can be before you actually purchase it. I see a lot of really basic questions on the forums and Facebook groups from people who bought the car and went in, it seems, pretty blindly, not knowing much about it. So I really want you all to be very well versed in this car and know what you're getting into before you purchase one. So if you guys are thinking about buying this car, make sure you hit the subscribe button because I have tons more coverage coming in the future for the Ioniq 5. So here's to maybe another 20,000 miles with this car. And if you guys liked today's video, be sure to give it a thumbs up. It really helps me out. And I'll see you guys in the next one. Take care, everybody.